What's up, guys? Today we're talking about wiring harnesses, and today we're going to be discussing what's the right wiring harness to use. How do you do wiring? Is it just voodoo? Today we're going to find out. I think we might actually tear the harness out of this car and show you how to basically make a tucked harness yourself and make adjustments. For example, my O2 sensor plug is over here and I need to relocate it towards the back. So the first thing that we got to do is tear this harness out, which is going to be really fun. So before I go tearing this harness out of the car, I'm going to explain what this harness is and why I used it and what I did to use it. So let's do some information. What harness did I use? Now to put this B16 in this car, I actually used the factory wiring harness. As a matter of fact, you're always going to need to use the factory wiring harness. There's just really no way around it. Unless your harness is hacked to death, try to keep and retain the original harness. The reason why is because it's going to work. You might have to add some wires, you might have to extend some wires, but there is no, let me buy this harness, unless it's a Chase Bays or Rye Wire harness. That's a great purchase. But if you don't have $500 to spend on one of those harnesses, then the best bet is to retain the factory harness and modify it. If your harness is hacked to death, then by all means replace it, but make sure you get the same year, the same model, just to be safe. Now there's another thing. The engine harness is actually different than the headlight harness or the AC harness. So basically the idea is to take the little D-series harness and put it on the car. And what I was left with this particular swap was I needed to add the VTEC wires, and I had to change and remove one of the wires for the IAC. All the pinouts for this are online, whether it's on Honda Tech forums or Google search images. It's the easiest way to figure it out. You can go to rywire.com and they'll tell you where a lot of the pinouts go. But the main thing is keep your factory harness. If you have a CRX that was dual point or an EF Civic that's dual point, you're gonna have to just bite the bullet and add the wires, because otherwise you can't just buy a SI harness for this side and have it work through the rest of the car. It's just not that simple. We wish it was that simple, but it's not. Now, as far as the ECU side of things, the easiest thing I can tell you to do if you want to swap your engine is to go OBD1. If you have a 92 to 95 Civic, you're in luck. You already have an OBD1 car. However, if your car is OBD2, you're definitely going to want to use a jumper harness and use an OBD1 ECU. It's going to be a whole lot easier to deal with in the long run, and you're not going to have to deal with as many sensors and wiring. It's going to make things a lot more simple, especially if you can just chip your ECU. You need a chipped ECU, you can find them at xenocron.com or eBay. You can buy chips off of eBay. Do I suggest that? Is that the right way to go? No. You're not going to make max power without hitting a dyno and having someone tune it, of course. But to get up and go and get your car moving, that's the best way to go. Okay, so here you can see my ECU with a chip in it right here, but I've already removed the top just so you can see. And also, here is my OBD2 harness plugged into the jumper harness that makes it OBD1. It's not super pretty, but it works. No problem without any check engine light. It's reliable. The car starts every time. Now, if I want to get this harness out of here, I've got to unplug these, whoop, bloop, bloop, send it through the firewall. So I've removed the intake just so you can see kind of how ratty and nasty and stupid this harness is. Anyway, so you can see my terrible VTEC wiring here. It's pretty ugly. And here's our main harness here. We have to remove the battery and the battery tray to get the harness out of the car. But pretty much it hooks up on this side, hooks up on that side. We disconnect the alternator and all of the sensors. So let's see if we can make it a little bit cleaner. Okay, now I've removed the battery. Now I have to remove this battery tray. It has a little plastic cover. And then we have 3 12mm bolts. 1, 2, and 3. Now usually these might be a little bit rusty to get out, so good luck. Okay, annoyingly I got the bolts out. There's our harness where it plugs in through the firewall. Now I also have to take the fuse box cover off to get this wire out, this first one, because it is attached to the harness. Now this might sound like a very stupid tip and very obvious, but when you take this screw out, it's a very specific size screw. Lift the wire out and stick the screw right back in there. In fact, do that with just about every bolt. You won't lose them. That way it's there for when you go to put it back in. Okay, now we need to unplug all the clips that we can see. The distributors, one. Boop. See the VTech temperature. Reverse. 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 Now one thing to note is that the battery wire is a separate harness. The charging, it goes straight to the starter. I'm gonna have to pull this off. It's just me. I can't sit here and film and pull it all off at the same time, so I'm just gonna pull it off. Now, the biggest, most important damn wire on this whole harness is this right here, the thermostat housing ground. Make sure that you put this back on tightly or your car will not run or start. As a matter of fact, usually the check engine light will flash super fast and make a bunch of clicking noises. Speedo, map, TPS. Of course, the air idle control valve, which is hidden. And it's also a pain in the ass. The injectors. Okay, so what I've done here is I've disconnected all the wires on this side, and here it is. This chunk right here, okay? The starter wire I have moved over here for cleanliness, just to keep things organized. That's the VTech wires, which we're gonna wire into the damn harness. Now, we're gonna attempt to pull this thing out. Oh boy, and it's just that simple. So we have this entire side taken off. Next we have to disconnect this one and the alternator and oil pressure, knock sensor, things like that. So here it is, pulled the whole harness out from this section over the firewall, but this is the whole side we need to worry about. Trying to get this damn thing out and in there is a pain in the ass. But this is usually tucked on the back of the block, so not a big deal. What we're gonna do is cut the tape and all the zip ties and everything that's around it, and basically just get things separated so that we can make them a bit thinner, a bit easier to work with. We're gonna have to move the O2 sensor plug over onto the back side. That's about it. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. Make sure it kind of tucks out of the way and we should be good. When you see these are held on by these little clips, what you do is you just push the tab out and lift up and they come off. And really what this is you might be wondering what this is, but it's a block off. What it does is it feeds all these wires power, and that's what both of these do basically. Now we're just exposed with the wires. Now to really shorten all this up, we're going to use a razor blade and we're going to cut it apart and keep moving. What I've done is worked my way this way, cutting off any excess bundles or the fact that I need to move some stuff away. So here are the O2 sensors that I need to move over to here. This is the temperature sensors and the reverse sensor, distributor plug, starter, speed sensor, power blocks, then the injector wiring, TPS sensor, map sensor, temperature sensor, the alternator plugs, the oil pressure plug, and then it goes off to the other side. Even though it seems super complicated, it's really just a couple of sections. So now we're going to button this up. Now we're going to take these and get this extended to where I need. I'm going to tape it all up. I'm going to make it nice and tight, and then we're going to reinstall it. Now our harness is pretty much done. We've got all these pieces nice and taped separately. Go over to here. Oh no, it looks terrible on film. But all these are injectors individually separated so that we can have room to tuck them. Now, the main thing that we have to do, one last thing we have to do, is wire in the VTech wire. We're going to take this into the harness, and we're going to tape this one onto the thermostat housing ground because we have our pressure switch deleted. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to take some of our cutaway loom and we're going to put it on this wire so that it looks pretty legit. Alright, so this is our VTech plug. What we're going to do is I've got it sitting here all wrapped up looking factory. I'm going to graft it in here. I'm going to make sure the wire goes that way towards the ECU. And I'm just going to tape it into the harness. Now I could cut open the harness and actually put it in there, but I don't really want to waste that much tape and it's not really necessary. Now that I have my wire going to the point where it's about to go through the firewall grommet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this wire through the grommet and then retape everything. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to roll this back, put the wire up against it, through it, and then roll it back. So I'm going to stick this wire up against the back of it and roll it this way. On top of it. Then to push it back this way, and there's the wire. I'll pull through here, so it's going to go through the firewall. So here is our fully sort of kind of tucked harness, but it's going to give us enough to really clean things up and tuck it away and hide it away where you won't be able to see much of it. And we have a reliable harness that will plug and play with our engine, no problem. Can you see any wires? Wires? This is the final product. You can't really see any wires other than like the VTech wire, just at first glance. It's not really like a tuck, really. But everything is kind of nicely stuffed away. See, here's our main harness, which kind of hides in there, especially once we put our intake in, you won't see it. But I mean, for now, I mean, it looks pretty clean. Give yourself 4 or 5 hours for this one. You know, all we're really doing is just kind of tucking things out of the way, just making it nice and neat. And now we find out if we screwed anything up. I'm not sure if I got the ECU plugged up. We got a squealy belt. And that concludes today's episode at Honda Garage.